October 14th, 1066. Dawn mist clings to the rolling hills of East Sussex as two armies face each other across a blood-soaked field that will define the future of England. King Harold's Saxon shield wall stands defiant against Duke William's Norman cavalry. Swords clash against shields. Arrows darken the sky. It's medieval warfare at its most brutal. But let's change one thing. Hidden in the morning fog, something that shouldn't exist for another 1,000 years prepares to alter the course of history forever. A 12-man Special Air Service squadron from 2024, armed with weapons that would make gods weep and technology that turns night into day. So what happens when the most elite soldiers on Earth are dropped into the middle of the Dark Ages' most famous battle? Can a handful of modern warriors rewrite the Norman conquest? Or will even the SAS be overwhelmed by sheer medieval brutality? This isn't your average medieval skirmish we're talking about. The Battle of Hastings represents everything savage about 11th century combat. We're looking at roughly 15,000 men total, split between Harold's Anglo-Saxon Huscarls and William's Norman Knights, all committed to a fight that will crown a king or bury a kingdom. The Saxons bring their legendary shield wall, a formation so tight that spears can barely find gaps. These aren't farmers with pitchforks. These are professional warriors who've spent decades perfecting the art of standing shoulder to shoulder, while enemy cavalry charges straight at their faces. Their Danish axes can cleave through chainmail like paper, and their round shields are built to turn aside Norman lances. Against them rides William's heavy cavalry, the medieval equivalent of main battle tanks. Knights encased in chainmail, wielding steel-tipped lances and riding war horses bred specifically for trampling infantry. Behind them march crossbowmen, whose bolts can punch through Saxon shields, and Breton infantry armed with swords that have tasted blood across half of Europe. This is a collision of military doctrines that have dominated warfare for centuries. But tucked into that morning mist sits something that would make both armies question their sanity. A modern SAS squadron represents the absolute pinnacle of human military evolution. 12 operators who can run 20 miles in full kit, place a bullet through a coin from 800 meters, and coordinate attacks using encrypted communications that might as well be telepathy to medieval minds. Each man carries an L119A2 rifle capable of firing 750 rounds per minute with accuracy that would seem supernatural to 11th century eyes. We're talking about weapons that can engage targets beyond the visual range of any medieval archer. Their squad automatic weapon gunner shoulders an L110A3 machine gun loaded with 200 rounds of 5.56 NATO ammunition that can cut through chainmail like tissue paper. Every operator packs a Glock 17 sidearm for close encounters, plus fragmentation grenades that contain more explosive power than anything William's siege engineers could imagine. They wear Osprey body armor designed to stop rifle rounds, with ceramic plates that could deflect a crossbow bolt without leaving a bruise. Their helmets alone represent technology centuries ahead of anything medieval metallurgy could produce. But here's where it gets interesting. These operators don't just bring superior firepower. They carry night vision goggles that turn darkness into daylight, tactical radios for instant communication across the battlefield, and medical supplies that could save lives from wounds that would be death sentences in 1066. They've trained for urban warfare, desert combat, and jungle operations, but nothing in their extensive preparation covered fighting mounted knights with lances. The psychological impact alone could shatter medieval morale. Imagine being a Saxon warrior, locked in formation, when the morning air suddenly erupts with sounds no human has ever heard. The crack of supersonic bullets, the distinctive chatter of automatic weapons, explosions that shake the earth beneath your feet while producing smoke and flame beyond anything medieval minds could comprehend. As the sun climbs higher over Senlac Hill, both medieval armies prepare for a battle that will determine England's future. Norman cavalry forms into wedges designed to smash Saxon lines. Anglo-Saxon huscarls grip their axes and prepare to die for their king. Neither side knows that 12 ghosts from the future are about to turn this historical clash into something unprecedented. The stage is set for a confrontation that will test whether a millennium of military advancement can overcome medieval numbers, terrain, and sheer bloody-minded determination. The battle begins, as it always has, in every timeline. Norman archers loose their first volley, sending thousands of arrows arcing toward the Saxon shield wall. Harold's men raise their shields and brace for impact. But before a single arrow finds its mark, the SAS team opens fire from concealed positions along the tree line. The L-190A2 rifles crack like thunder, and Norman archers begin dropping before they understand what's happening. Medieval minds have no framework for projectiles that travel faster than sound. One moment an archer is drawing his bowstring, the next he's collapsing without explanation, while his companions search the sky for invisible demons. The psychological effect spreads like wildfire through Norman ranks. Horses rear and bolt as their riders struggle to control mounts terrified by sounds that shouldn't exist. The carefully planned cavalry charge dissolves into chaos as knights find themselves fighting their own animals instead of Saxon warriors. Meanwhile, the machine gunner has identified the biggest threat and opens up with controlled bursts into the heaviest concentration of Norman cavalry. The L-110A3 chews through chainmail and horseflesh with equal efficiency. What should have been a thunderous charge becomes a killing field littered with steel and screaming animals. But the SAS team faces a problem no amount of training anticipated. They're fighting an entire medieval army with limited ammunition. Each operator carries roughly 300 rounds, plus whatever's in the machine gun. Against 7,000 Normans, that math doesn't work in their favor. Worse, they're operating without GPS, satellite communications, or air support. They're ghosts from the future, but they're alone. William himself witnesses his cavalry being cut down by invisible forces and does what any competent medieval commander would do. He adapts. Unable to locate the source of this supernatural assault, he orders his remaining forces to advance on foot using the terrain for cover. Norman crossbowmen spread out and begin methodical advances, hoping to draw fire and identify enemy positions. The Breton infantry forms up behind makeshift shields and starts closing the distance using every dip and fold in the landscape. The SAS operators recognize the threat immediately. Medieval crossbows might be primitive, but a bolt to the head will kill a modern soldier just as dead as a Saxon warrior. They begin leapfrogging between positions, using fire and movement tactics to avoid getting pinned down. But every time they relocate, they're burning precious ammunition to suppress Norman advances. When the smoke clears and the last echoes of gunfire fade over Senlac Hill, the SAS squadron would stand victorious, but forever changed. 12 men with modern weapons proved that a millennium of technological advancement can indeed rewrite history's bloodiest pages. But they'd also learned that courage, determination, and sheer numbers don't become obsolete just because better weapons exist. The Norman conquest would end before it began, Harold would keep his crown, and England's destiny would take an entirely different path. What do you think would have happened next?